There are few but very critical reasons and causes why expectations management become a disaster. Let's talk about three of them.
Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the Revolving Change podcast, where we're dedicated to your career and business growth by implementing lasting, measurable change. I'm one of your regular hosts, Joanna, a junior coach here at Revolving Change, and here with me today is our founder, Mr. Jorge Lobo.
AKA your analog dinosaur. You'll soon be a senior coach, I
I'd
think.
rather stay the junior
Okay.
and keep my youth. All right, so today, ladies and gentlemen, we have something exciting. Well, I always say something exciting, something new, but it is because we've talked about expectations management, episode 2 of the Revolving Change podcast. That was a while back. And now we're going to dive in deeper with regard to our expectations management.
We're going to
And
focus on
today
the
we're going to,
three critical reasons why they fall apart and create disasters in business. And often we see
right.
expectations flying off and just don't know, cannot pin down the main reasons. And those are
Yeah.
three of the ones I would like to go into. And I feel very, very
Yeah.
strongly about it.
Okay, so why don't we start with the first one, Jorge?
Okay, well, when I say first, we're going to the first on the list, not the first in importance, because they're all
Mm.
equally important and all very often interconnected, interdependent. So there is not a
Mm.
first, second, third, fourth, but we're going to talk about three of them today
Mm-hmm.
and how we should ideally deal with them. The first one I'd like to address is a particular skill that will affect how expectations management is managed and led, which is feedback.
Okay.
The role of feedback is absolutely essential for expectations management. So when we are setting expectations, we are discussing and agreeing expectations, we need to have learned, we need to be skilled at requesting, accepting, and giving unsolicited and solicited feedback. Like when people ask you, well, what's your views on this? What is your opinion on this? What are your views? What is your opinion? We should have learned how we respond to that without feeling uncomfortable, without having the other person, with what we say, feeling defensive. So,
Mm-hmm.
feedback is absolutely fundamental, the foundation for expectations management. Where does it often go wrong? It goes wrong in that as we are discussing, talking about
Mm-hmm.
setting and agreeing expectations, one person takes it as an imposition, not as a discussion. The other
Mm-hmm.
person feels that this imposition is aggressive and therefore feels defensive. And I don't need to go further. Managers,
Yeah.
leaders, and entrepreneurs know that this leads most of the time into a conflict that will not help or support the achievement of agreed and set expectations. How do we deal with that?
Yeah.
Critical is that we learn to set expectations about setting expectations, that we set expectations about how we want to deal with feedback. So if we agree
Okay.
first, how are we going to deal with feedback? We're not going to be personal. When we say, when we issue a critique, it's a critique of the object, of the situation, of the process, of the task, not of the person.
Mm.
When we're going to address a shortcoming of a person, we're going to address the opportunity for improvement, not the put down. When we have learned those skills and become the fiber of how we manage, how we deal with each other, then expectations management process becomes, I won't say a breeze, but it becomes much easier because as it may derail, which happens, we already have the feedback skills to actually bring it back into within the guardrails. We have a way to bring it back to common sense. Say, wait a minute, I think we have a misunderstanding here. If I make sure the way I feel about this, because we have been trained on how to deal with expectations. So the key takeaway I would like to give you is that if you have not been trained and have really learned to be proficient in feedback, or your team is not yet trained and proficient in feedback, develop just three or four tools, points,
Mm.
which you make
Mm.
into your tool on how to deal with expectations, which is we're going to give constructive feedback. We're not going to be personal. We're going to let
Mm-hmm.
everybody talk and express their opinions, and we're always going to have a positive outcome at the end of an exchange. Make those little bullets, put them under the agenda, and make sure that at least you focus on those if you don't have further feedback training. Do you have any questions on that?
Not so far. I want to go into like how do you ensure, because we're now going to go into this entire loop of setting expectations for feedback. And then you also, what I'm getting is that when you set expectations, you need to set expectations for a lot of things as well. Because my question that came into my head as you were explaining this was, okay, you've mentioned positive outcomes, but positive outcomes can mean different things for the different people. So is that also something that both parties need to agree upon? Like, what does a successful outcome look like?
Ideally, yes. Ideally, you want to have agreed the whole thing, the whole process ahead.
Mm.
But we are all humans, as humans are. We have
Mm-hmm.
different perceptions, different opinions, different experiences,
Mm-hmm.
different sets of beliefs. We are in different shapes. Maybe one day we're in a bad shape. We have a problem
Mm-hmm.
and our mind is elsewhere. So I think the positive outcome should be agreed and defined as we want a step into solving the problem or diffusing a conflict. So anything which adds to conflict, which adds complexity, which adds negative emotions, which adds despair, should be
Mm-hmm.
discarded. So you can have a common understanding, and you could do that when you're a leader and you're running the meeting, for instance. Agree with the team. What do we call a positive outcome? And very often, the positive outcome, the most basic, lowest common denominator, is the absence of negatives. If you can agree there will be absence of negatives, you already are a step into the right direction. And I would keep it at this stage at the very, very basic, simple level,
Mm. Okay.
the
Yeah.
absence of negatives. So it's not a put down, it's your fault. No. Where do we move forward to solve the situation? How do we improve what we got? How do we prevent a further deterioration? If we achieve that, it's a positive outcome already. So basically, this is it. I mean, we don't need to overthink and overcomplicate it. We can, stay at simple tools, simple approaches, and just nail it down and move forward. So let me go to
Mm.
another one, which is of the three I pick as very important. They're all equally important. I said it before, but let me stress is expectations management across different generations in the workplace.
Mm.
This is totally mostly overlooked and undervalued. The impact of it is the first time we have sometimes four generations, dinosaurs like me working with Gen Zs and everybody
Yeah.
else in between.
Yeah.
So I don't need to elaborate, I think, into expressing how we dinosaurs function, but also how we watch Gen Zs being hooked onto their mobile devices. And I don't try to be negative,
Mm.
I'm trying to be observant of what I watch.
Mm. Mm.
When we go to restaurants, we can see the different generations, how they behave different. If you are in a restaurant, you have different generations having dinner, you can see immediately which generation is at which table. And you can see the difference also when you have different generations sharing a table.
Yeah.
I've seen many times the dinosaurs asking the Gen Zs to put their phones down and things like that. Okay, so the same applies in business. And often what we have is an issue with immediate gratification. The younger the
Mm.
generation, the quicker the gratification should be. Older generations understand gratification is going to take longer, or the focus is
Mm-hmm.
not anymore on gratification, is on or retribution, depending how positive or negative people are, is also more focused on giving, on delivering, on supporting, on
Mm.
implementing change.
Mm.
So the key here is that the older generations, the more mature, I may say, generations, the maturity here is not meant as something positive or negative. It's a question of time and progress.
Mm-hmm.
The older, more mature generations are the ones that have to be understanding, accommodating, and supporting the younger ones because we cannot expect a Gen Z to move to a dinosaur level and understand how a dinosaur ticks, but we can expect a
Mm-hmm.
dinosaur to be open, to be empathetic, to be understanding and try to learn how well we work with millennials for many, many years and we understand millennials relatively well. I hope most of us do, but also understand Gen Zs. And here the key of the problem is that we're not doing that. And there is
Mm.
a different tools and processes we have worked with clients to help them overcome that. And that one of them is work through the generations. So
Mm.
when you're a dinosaur like me, you're going to work mainly with millennials and have the
Mm-hmm.
millennials help you connect and communicate with the Gen Zs. I'm going to use the three
Yeah.
generations only as an example
Yeah.
because there is
Yeah.
in between also, but to make it
For
simple
sure.
and to keep the focus, I'm
Yeah.
focused on those three. So I, as a dinosaur, will work with a millennial like you and have
Mm-hmm.
you help me work with some of our junior staff, which are Gen Zs, because you
Yeah.
understand them better than I do, and you're going to become the
Mm-hmm.
bridge of us three working together.
Yeah.
And where I'm saying this is when our clients see the way revolving change functions, we have four generations working together, and we're very successful at what we
We
do
do.
because we are
Yeah.
conscious, extremely conscious of the power, the richness, the contribution each generation brings to the table and it brings to the
Mm-hmm.
actual
Mm-hmm.
progress we're making. I'm learning a
Mm-hmm.
lot from Gen Zs. Is it all good? Is it all positive? No. But the same way Gen Zs are learning from dinosaurs, and all that they learn is not always good and always
Yeah.
positive because we have
Yeah.
our own tweaks and kinks that people don't like. So
Yeah.
we're all perfectly imperfect, and we need to do is
Yeah.
learn from our strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So bottom line is, and I would like to give you maybe two tools that you can use. Is one is you make it systematic to work through the middle generation to the younger generation and also the way back. Have the Gen
Mm-hmm.
Zs communicate with millennials that will translate, interpret, and it's not translate, it's interpret the communication and the message for the dinosaurs, for the baby boomers. The other thing is, as you have processes, assign different generations to run the process. So you can have a Gen
Mm.
Z running a process that is meant that where other generations are participating, but you make the Gen Z responsible.
Yeah.
By doing that, you're going to give this Gen Z an incredible amount of authority and power. And when
Mm-hmm.
it's managed well, and you as a leader will be able to manage this well, you will make this Gen Z grow dramatically because it's going to see the
Mm-hmm.
influence it has, he or she has on other more experienced generations. The bottom line is that they have to work together, and you give this each generation at a time. And I recommend to start from the youngest one, the authority and the power, but you put a co-chair, a co-manager of another generation to work together. And this way you make them all
Mm.
grow simultaneously. Now, in addition, another tool different than this would be to create forums. So when we have products, which is, for instance, the action needed program for problem solving, which we have implemented with many of our corporate clients, what do? We have a forum to review potential problems and solutions. So we we allow different generations to be in charge of a forum for discussion and teach them how to be empathetic and understanding and communicate with all the different generations.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, we start in this case the other way around. We start with more senior, more mature, more experienced, more empathetic, hopefully, more patient leaders that will get the teams to work together. And that way, you train your whole team of all generations to participate, to work, and to understand how leadership in this context works. So, these are
Yeah.
two simple tools that every manager, every company can apply.
Yeah. That's very. I like a lot of the things that you said. Number one, it's very strategic to use a millennial to bridge the generation before the millennials. So it's the boomers and the Gen Zs because technically speaking, the millennials are actually the actual bridge. If you study
Yeah,
um, if you study the generations right now, that's one of the things they call the millennials. It's the bridge because the millennials have the analog childhood and have the digital adulthood that the Gen Zs are experiencing from childhood right now. So they have a really good understanding of both generations and are able to, you know, bridge, as what we've been talking about. They are the most capable of bridging it that way. So that is a way. That's a way to use the generational differences to your advantage. And another thing that um, I'd like to point out is that the 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 perspective that because the older generation have more understanding and have more perspective, they should be the ones to adjust to the generations after them. However, as much as not as ideal as that sounds, it doesn't happen that way. A lot of the times, the older generations are like, "I'm older than you, so I have seniority or what like or whatnot. I have more experience than you. You
Authority.
should listen to me." Yeah, that well, you know, I have more authority than you. I'm senior than you, so I'm right. Or you should rise up to my level. That kind of thing. So, what do
I
you
think it's an
have to say
important
about
point.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is an important point you're making because people tell me, so why didn't you retire, play golf, and go your, scuba diving and do
Yeah.
your skydiving and do all the things I love to do? And I said, I'm just so motivated by working with all the younger people. I'm learning so much from them, and they are so thirsty for me to share my experiences with them. And I see we are creating so much momentum, so much change, so much excitement, so much
Mm.
passion.
Mm.
We are awakening a number of very positive strength and movement and energies. And that is so exhilarating. I mean, there's no way I want to
Mm.
change that for any scuba diving trip whatsoever. I can scuba dive later anyway. The fish are going to be there, hopefully. The way it's scary,
Oh my
though.
gosh.
I hope they're going to be there.
Climate change.
I've been to your
Yeah.
country to scuba dive. I've been in many places in the world to scuba dive. So, but the bottom line for me is that every day we are making progress. Every day we are discovering new ways of applying what we used to know and we know now and combining with
Mm-hmm.
new technologies. And technology is not our focus, and I'm not very
Mm-hmm.
good with it. Although I'm coming from pen and paper basically, and we're dealing with AI, so I've gone a long
Yeah.
way. But on the other
Yeah.
hand, I understand people that only know technology and don't have all the experiences that millennials and us had with working with people without technology. The key is that working with younger generations, and I don't want to focus only on Gen Zs, is that we share our experience prior to the tech era. And I know why. Why I know because my daughters are millennials and they
Mm.
grew up in this transition. They still read books, but they
Mm.
use technology. So, I belong to the prior generations. Of course, we had no tech, but today they only have tech. So
Yeah.
bringing this together is so rich, and you can see when you share the experiences and you teach the younger generations, and I would implore to leaders and managers of larger companies to involve the young people in understanding how it works without technology or with less technology, not without, but with less technology, which means the focus on people, the focus on the skills that we need to connect with each other, to interact with each other. Technology will never replace how we give feedback. It will not replace how we talk with each other, how we look at each other, how
Mm.
we don't look at each
Mm.
other, how we respond, our nonverbals. Technology will never change that. And you know what? It has been an issue for the last 30 years, 20 years, 10 years. It is today, and it will be in 10 years from now and in 20 years from now. It will not change
Mm.
because as long as people are involved, and they will be involved, maybe less and less, but they are involved, the skills
Mm-hmm.
are paramount. Okay, so, but I think unless, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Do you have any particular question to this particular point? Otherwise, I move on.
No. Let's move on. What's the third one?
Cultural. The cultural influence on expectations management cannot be overstated. That's another one which is often overlooked because multinationals have people all over the world working together, and expectations don't always mean expectations depending your culture. Now, some of our audience and our friends and clients say, well, we are not a multinational. And, I got news for you. We are all multinational. Even us, small
Mm.
revolving change, we are multinational. Because
Mm-hmm.
multinational, the old days meant you have locations all over the world and each location has its own culture. Today, multinational,
Mm.
because of the way we work remote and remotely connected, we are all multinational. We are working with people in the US, people in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
people in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Where we have else? I think that's it for the moment.
UK.
Oh, UK, yeah.
Yeah.
So that shows that being aware of the cultural impact and having
Mm.
the cultural input is
Mm.
absolutely essential to have it work, especially when we are international, multinational,
Mm-hmm.
remote. Because you're
Mm.
multinational, you can take a plane and be in front of people. You probably have a chance of more easily overcome some of the barriers and obstacles and I would say preconceptions that people have.
Mm.
But
Mm.
being on a Zoom call, and if that's all we know and all we have, and all you see is you don't know
Mm.
if I'm wearing my suits or Bermudas or my feet are naked or not,
Mm-hmm.
it's unimportant. And yet, when we are face to face and we are dressed, we are in our uniforms and we have a behavior that we display, and we cannot just switch off and disappear, we are there, it changes everything. So being aware
Mm.
of culture when we're working, particularly remote like we are now, when we are interconnected around the world, is extremely important that, and here comes also, when we talk about generations, the mature ones, the more experienced ones are the ones that should learn and share how different cultures operate
Mm-hmm.
across cultures. So if you're working with the Philippines, I would like to have a senior person or at least a millennial that will share with
Mm-hmm.
me how does the culture work in the Philippines? What are the things you do and you
Mm.
don't do? What are the things you say and you don't say?
Yeah.
How do you say them to
Yeah.
get across?
Mm-hmm.
The same with our American friends or the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And people say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, they all speak English." Well, not really. We all have a common base English. English is not far from my first language,
Yeah.
and yet we all, and it's not your mother tongue either, although we're both proficient and can communicate.
Yeah.
And I sound very
Mm-hmm.
American, and I'm not American, but I'm not British, but I learned English from England, and I write
Yeah.
English from England, and I speak English from America. Culturally speaking, we are sponges, we are absorbing
Mm.
to what we get exposed, but we also need to
Mm-hmm.
be able to use it to better communicate and understand other cultures.
Mm.
I remember my days dealing with Eastern Europe, dealing with Russia, dealing with Thailand, dealing with Africa, South Africa, with Nigeria, uh, Egypt. There are certain things that are perceived offensively, which are not welcome, which are a turnoff in a relationship. And understanding when you're going to deal with expectations, what to do and not to do, and how to do it is absolutely fundamental for expectation not to get
Mm.
derailed. Now, how to deal with that? I go back to a forum, and the forum would be
Mm-hmm.
of people, and I would say in this context, I would recommend, we have done it and it has worked more often than not. I won't say it always worked because we humans are often complex and not everything works with everybody, but most of the time it
Yeah.
worked. That would create what we call a cultural expectations forum, and
Mm-hmm.
you bring same generation though, because you want them to not have the generational issue to deal with, and you only want to focus on culture.
Mm. You want to
So you
isolate it.
have exactly. So you have maybe two, max two, because when you have more than two, you have three generations. One is going to be squeezed, right? It's going to be in the middle.
Mm.
You don't want to get caught in the middle. It's not a joke, and it's a fact. You never want to get caught in the middle. So you have two generations max, and the focus is culture. What are the things in our country which are offensive? Which are the things you want to avoid? And everybody
Mm-hmm.
will pitch in, and you work out like a cultural manual that we all can address, we can all read, we can all share, and become aware, empathetic, sympathetic, and tolerant of the cultural issues, each one of us.
Yeah.
My message is our experience is be aware of cultural differences,
Mm.
create a forum, get
Mm-hmm.
the forum to bring onto the table, bring onto discussion the pros and cons, with the do's and don'ts, the risks dealing with our culture,
Mm.
document it, and make it a Bible, make it a handbook, rather. So we're not talking religion. Make it a handbook for everybody to refer to, and make sure there are regular reviews. Even if it's just once a year, it doesn't matter. Make a regular review. Why? Because you're going to show and demonstrate that you're concerned, that you're serious about culture, you're respectful of culture. And culture, like everything else, changes. Therefore,
Mm.
we need to keep adjusting to the changes in culture. So that would be my 5 cents worth.
No, that was actually really very enriching. It was more than 5 cents worth. And
I'm glad.
because of the, yeah, because of the richness of the information, I'm actually I'm itching to go back and really look into each one and process it. And if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching us on YouTube right now, and you're like me and you want to take notes and really go through writing it down, we actually have show notes available for you to download. If you're part of our core membership, you can just access this through our learning portal. And if you're not yet part of our core membership, you can just simply sign up below. Just click the link in the description and you'll get instant access by just entering your email and joining that program. With that being said, we encourage you to join us next week for more valuable content like this.
Well, now let me to come in very quickly. So, thank you for all of your time listening to us. We want to also work out some tools based on what we said and make them available to you. Conclusions of very simple helps on how to focus on some of the solutions we talked about. However, we're going to be in our website, you're going to be finding our event master schedule. We're going to have our podcasts, our events, and many more activities
Mm-hmm.
we're launching. So I know I'm jumping the gun. It's not there yet. It will be very, very soon. But
Yeah.
just so you know, you don't need to make notes. It will be that when you join us and you get access to our master schedule, then you can click and register and put on your diary if you're interested in seeing it live, or put in your diary to see maybe the notes afterwards. And with that,
Yes.
I pass it on to you and say goodbye and thank you.
Right. Goodbye, everyone. See you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.